Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ottumwa City Council meeting. Before we get started, if everybody rise, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Chris will go ahead and take the roll.
Councilmember Hull.
Here.
Councilmember Pope.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Galloway.
Here.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Here.
Mayor Johnson.
Here. The next item on our agenda is to approve the consent agenda. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Councilmember Pope.
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Yes.
The next item is to approve tonight's city council agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda with the removal of the tabled items 1 and 2 to be put back onto the agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Hull.
Yes.
Councilmember Pope.
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway.
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Yes.
The next item is our city administrator's report to council and the citizens. I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. I just had a couple of things to comment on. First is talking about work sessions. Last night, City Council held a work session to review the rather lengthy compensation plan, which was tabled last week and just recently removed from the table. The session was held in room 108 to allow for better visibility on the monitors than the council chambers allows. One drawback is that room doesn't have the audio-visual setup for recording. Aside from not recording the session, it was open to the public and several employees were there in attendance. So I just want to make a quick note regarding the difference between meetings and work sessions. Work sessions are typically less formal and do not include official action. There was no action taken on the plan last night. They provide an opportunity for staff and the city council to discuss and work through 1 or 2 larger issues, more time-consuming type things, and provide direction to staff as needed or requested. Additionally, the sessions do not typically include public comment, although they are still held publicly for the observation purposes. Special meetings, on the other hand, similar to city council meetings, they follow a similar structure to the regular meetings, which are scheduled for us. It's typically the first and third Tuesday of the month, but typically they're just on a different day or time. They also typically have a smaller agenda focused on the topics that are on there. Unlike work sessions, City Council may take official action if it desires and would typically include an opportunity for public comment regarding agenda items and or items not on the agenda. So those are kind of the key differences there. We've had budget work sessions. Those have even been at the Law Enforcement Center because that was a better facility for what we were looking at and having multiple monitors and space for a larger attendance. We've had them at Bridgeview Center or meetings at Bridgeview Center if needed. So we try to keep consistent, but there are some differences, and just to kind of help explain that. Secondly, in regards to some comments that were made last week, I'd like to thank former Mayor Tom Lazio for presenting his comments. Although I may not fully agree with the comments that were presented, City Council includes an opportunity for the public to speak out about a variety of concerns. There are several issues going on in the city, and some of those may carry personal feelings for individuals, and the public may want to have more information about particular issues or decisions that are reached. While the majority of the work city staff and the council conduct is open to the public, there are some items that remain confidential, and in some cases until those issues are resolved. At last week's meeting, 3 issues that were identified were attendance at the city council meetings, administrative leave of DPW SEALs, and administrative leave of some firefighters. In response to the first item, it is unfortunate the meeting was canceled on June 6th due to not having a quorum. In hindsight, it may have been best to postpone or prematurely cancel the meeting, knowing the 2 members had already expressed their absence in advance. That left no margin for if there was an illness, accident, or other emergency. And there have been occasions in the past, especially during COVID, when City Council was in jeopardy of not having quorum, and several times where Solid Waste Commission meetings were not able to be held due to a lack of quorum. Council members have been pretty good about letting the mayor or staff know in advance when they're not able to attend a meeting. Unfortunately, this was one incident where we were not alerted by one of those 3 members in advance and could have been proactively taken measures to reschedule that meeting. In regard to the other 2 items, these are ongoing personnel issues. Again, I understand individuals may have special ties or just a general curiosity as to what is going on in these areas. Unfortunately, information related to these matters remains confidential. There is a balance that is weighed between information that is public and the potential harm it may create for the employee in question. The employee does have rights that are considered as well, and a violation of those rights may place the city in a position of a lawsuit. City council and staff are not hiding anything. We're not hiding behind any statements or false claims of confidential personnel records. These particular items are current, fluid personnel matters which have not been resolved. The appropriate level of information will be shared publicly as it becomes available and is ready to be released. Thank you.
I appreciate you for providing that update, Phil. Does council have any questions or comments that they'd like to make?
No, I want to thank Phil too. I appreciate you saying that.
We have no public hearings tonight and we have no ordinances, so we'll move to departmental recommendations and reports. Oh, sorry. I need to ask if anybody in the audience wants to speak to any agenda items that are on our agenda tonight. I didn't see any sheets up here, but I should have still asked, so I apologize. Does anybody want to speak on any of the agenda items on our agenda tonight? Okay, we'll go ahead and move to departmental reports.
Wapello County Foundation grant applications. Recommendation: approve applications to Wapello County Foundation for funding for an automatic pool vacuum for the beach and funding for playground equipment for the Ottumwa Park Campground.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, Gene, I believe you're going to present.
Okay, yes, thank you, Your Honor. On July 11th, 2023, the Ottumwa Parks Advisory Board approved 2 grant applications for the Wapello County Foundation. The first is an automatic pool vacuum for the beach Ottumwa. The second is playground equipment for the Ottumwa Park Campground. These applications are due by August 31st, 2023. The Wapello County Foundation requires that grant applications from the city of Ottumwa must be approved by the city council.
I noticed in the packet there was no dollar amounts. Can you tell us what the dollar amount was for the pool vacuum and the playground equipment?
The pool vacuum is $6,600 and the playground equipment is $60,000.
Does council have any questions for Gene? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Presentation from the Ottumwa Community School District regarding construction of tennis court alternatives. Recommendation: receive presentation and consider options regarding the previously authorized funding for construction of courts in Sycamore Park.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Phil, are you going to
Yeah,
start the
I'll
discussion?
Kick this off, and I believe there's some tablets that we have. So while Edward brings up the presentation on the screen, we can hand out the tablets and any other materials you have. So just as a reminder for the public and the city council, Resolution 12-2022 was adopted at the January 18, 2022 meeting for the city council. Resolution authorized the expense of up to $750,000 toward the construction of tennis courts. Since that time, a comprehensive parks plan identified the location for the courts. Additionally, specifications were created and the project was bid out. The cost of the project came in considerably higher than anticipated, and the city council rejected the bids. Recently, adjustments were made to the specs and the project was relet. The city received 1 bid recently. That was again higher than anticipated. The need for improved tennis courts has increased during this time period, and the district is interested in seeing the project move forward. And in consultation with Superintendent McGrory, one option was to look at an alternate site, and kind of turn it over to the school district to take on this project. And so there's a presentation that they would like to make, I think in coordination with the Friends of the Parks, and talk about how we can improve the status of our tennis courts here in the community. And I'll turn it over to Superintendent McGrory.
Thanks a lot, Phil. And I also want to thank the council for your time this evening and your willingness to entertain this proposal. Kind of like what Phil talked about, I probably don't have to reiterate the need for tennis courts in our community. It's a high need. For us as a school district, it's an enormous need. You may or may not know that we aren't able to hold a lot of tournaments here because we don't even have tennis courts to be able to host tournaments. And we really want to provide that, and we really need to, not only as a community, but also as a district, to provide those type of resources to our community, to our students, and so forth. And so, you know, we're constantly faced as individuals when you have a barrier come up. How do you move past that barrier? And when the bids came in high, like Phil said, we start to think about how can we still keep this joint project alive? I think it's, you know, one of the reasons I went into this joint project from a district representation was I really wanted our community to see the city and the district working together, and then work together on a project like this. It's really powerful for our community to see that. And so I started to think, how do we keep this project alive? And we have a proposal tonight that basically what we're asking the city council tonight is to approve the recommendation of allowing the district to move the project. And we'll talk about where that's going to be located. We'll give you details. And then also the $750,000 or $700,000 that comes along with your commitment, that we could use that for this project. The way we came up with an alternative site was one of our goals at the high school has been to really create a campus-like atmosphere. So what we've been doing, as the council probably knows, is in the near future, we'll have a competition gym built up at the high school. So we'll be able to do our varsity basketball, volleyball, wrestling. We'll also be up at the high school. And this is just another piece where we're proposing the tennis courts to be is at the high school. And this would just be another piece for us as far as following our varsity sports being campus-like feel. And within the varsity sports, we want to create this campus-like feel up at the high school. And we think this will be a nice piece where it's going to be located. It will connect, not only be a nice opportunity for our community as far as where it's located, it'll be an easy location for our community, but also connect the whole campus from Schaefer all the way to the high school. And so when we looked at this, we think we have an ideal piece of property for a lot of different reasons. And we'll discuss those reasons here shortly. But I kind of wanted to give an overview, quick overview of why, you know, we got to the place we did as far as the location and so forth. And Landon's going to come up in a minute, my director of information. He's going to come up and talk about some of the key components of this project. Then I'll come back and talk about the funding, and then we'll also show you pictures of where we're proposing to have the location as well. So, Landon? Yep.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening to the council. A couple of the key considerations. I'm going to start off with the fact that this facility, like all school district facilities, will remain open to the public. Obviously, we just completely installed new playgrounds at many of our school facilities, and this facility would be no different, where the public would obviously be welcome into these tennis courts. The proposed location, which we're going to talk to in just a minute, we have confirmed would allow for the construction of up to 12 tennis courts in this slot. From the budget perspective, this project will not exceed the city's funds that they've already committed. The school district and Friends of Ottumwa Parks is committed to ensuring that we're not going back to the city to ask for additional funding if these bids do come in high. Maintenance, from the maintenance perspective, what we're proposing is that the school district would take on the cost of maintaining these tennis courts and the upkeep associated with those. And also neighborhood revitalization. The construction of the tennis courts will certainly contribute to improving that lot as it currently sits. And I'm going to show you that right after this slide. Some other considerations. Obviously, this would be in a pretty good location to the downtown district. We anticipate, as Superintendent McGrory mentioned, large tournaments will be making their way to Ottumwa with facilities as we're proposing. And obviously, they're in close proximity to the shopping downtown and eating and spending funds there. The school district with this facility plans to install restrooms that would be open to the public and a concessions facility. Parking wise, if you're familiar with what a lot of folks may call this area called the pit parking, this area would be completely renovated and allow for 60 additional parking spots to accommodate enough parking for those larger tournaments and any community events. That lot currently has nearly no lighting, and so this proposal also is to really make sure that area is well lit at night. The courts themselves will obviously have lighting as well and fencing to ensure security of those courts. We want to ensure that we're also being considerate to our neighbors. So by that we mean more directional lighting where we're not blasting the tennis court lights into the homes of our neighbors. And I'm going to turn this back over to Superintendent McGrory to talk about timeline.
Thanks, Landon. So one of the things I think City Council wants to know or hear is that the district, what is the level of commitment from the district? And we're not only committed to this project, but we're committed to starting this project soon. We know this is an ambitious timeline, but we will, if it is approved this evening, we will start the project looking at how we can make this project happen. We really think we can, by the end of the spring of next year, that we can have these courts up and running. So from a district perspective, we are wanting to move kind of fast forward this very quickly. Just a reminder to the council, kind of how we initially, a couple years ago when we came together for this project, we talked about the city coming up with $750,000, the school district also $750,000, and then the Friends of Ottumwa Park, $600,000 to $750,000 as well. The Friends of this, what they were going to probably complement the project with would be things such as parking, restrooms, concessions, those type of things to really finish off the project. So the details of this, we'll have the responsibility of putting together the bidding process, the construction of the tennis courts, and where we're proposing, and Landon's going to show you some really nice visuals of where we're proposing, is Center Avenue, as Landon mentioned, what is kind of oftentimes referred to as the pit area. And you probably have seen this since I've been in the district, is that oftentimes I have lots of ideas, lots of thoughts, but I always vet them with a lot of people. Does this make sense? Is this a great location for this? And I probably took 10 to 15 people to the site that I thought would be naysayers to the project being here. And when they got a chance to see what the land looked like, what it could do for that area, and how well it fit for tennis courts, to a T, all of them were really excited about the project. So that got me thinking that I'm onto something here. I think this is a good location, and it's going to be a nice fit for our tennis courts. So I'll turn it back to Landon. He'll kind of go through some of the pictures, and then our Parks friends will come up and present as well, and then we'll open it up for questions.
All right, so in this picture, we're kind of facing west-southwest, as you can see the high school here. And if you keep an eye on this picture, we're going to show what the proposed courts would look like. So we'd be going from this to this. So this is that lot. This is to the dimensions of the proposed lot. This is 12 tennis courts. A couple things that you may point out initially. This shows these courts going all the way up to the street. That is not true. We just wanted to confirm for the city council meeting, dimension-wise, we could fit 12 courts in there. So it actually doesn't even go to the sidewalks on each side of the street. We've got 12 feet of spacing between the courts, obviously fencing between each section of 6 courts. As mentioned, probably way more lighting here than what's needed, but that's something we'd evaluate. Also, you'll see we have up from the kind of just up the hill there, we've added a walkway. We're also going to ensure that this facility is handicap accessible as well as we build this. Again, one thing to keep in mind too, and I've already had folks point this out, the tennis courts would not be this far away from the parking. They would be a little bit closer to that hill. So just wanted to point that out. And those are revisions we're currently making, if this project moves forward. Here's another look from the, again, what we refer to as the pit parking area, looking down on those courts. One more visual here is you can see we've got, there is an existing facility that's on that lot that we would plan to renovate to be, to provide the concessions and restrooms for this facility. So we will have restrooms, concessions, and also storage. And there's kind of the final look, looking to the west.
Could I possibly interrupt for just a
You bet.
second and ask, the conversation I had with Superintendent Ogori, he had mentioned bleachers somewhere. Where would those be located in respect to all of this?
Yeah, and I'll let Mike jump in with, but I believe the discussion was actually on that hill portion where you kind of see the single staircase there. It certainly would be feasible for us to extend that stairwell all the way across, so you would make bleachers directly on that hill, because as I mentioned, those tennis courts would be closer to those proposed bleachers. Yeah, great question. So your iPads won't go any further, but if you take a peek up here, this will show you kind of just a proposed flyover of what those courts will look like as it transitions to evening. As I mentioned, we're going to make our way up to the parking lot here. It will look rather dark here because we have yet to incorporate the lighting into this 3D model. I'm going to transition into the next one as well. Again, you can see we're just branding this Ottumwa and, adding some benches and those types of things. So again, we're making sure that spec-wise, this meets the national standards for installing tennis courts and also the Iowa Association of Athletics, both boys and girls union. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
One of the things that we would ask of the city at least to consider too is maybe a walking path from here to the high school and all the way up to Schaefer as well. A bike walking path, which again would be a nice for our community to be able to get around this facility as well. But with that, I'll turn it over to our friends. Bob, I think is going to present where they're at with fundraising for this project.
Good evening, council, and thank you for the time. First of all, I don't know if somebody could, you want to run that up to the, yeah. Just wanted to give you a kind of a timeline, and while Mark Hansen, former principal of Ottumwa High School and tennis coach, he's on our committee. We wanted an expert in the tennis arena. I'm not sure if we have enough for everybody, so you might have to share. So anyway, I'd like to also introduce a couple of other people. This is Blair Seams. She is in charge of William Penn fundraising. She is a professional fundraiser, so we like that on our committee. And behind me is Mark Garner. Mark has been part of the City Tennis Association. He's run adult and junior events. And then, of course, Mark Hansen. So I'd like to just share with you a little bit about the time frame. I've been part of Friends for a couple years now, and we submitted a grant in April of 21. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I hope I give you the abridged version. The request that we had to get a
professional recommendation for location and design for the future tennis courts was denied by the Legacy Foundation because the City of Ottumwa Comprehensive Plan superseded this. And so, okay, we have to draw back a little bit. So what we did was we went to the Ottumwa School District and the city with Phil Rath and Jean Rathje, and made a presentation. We really need new tennis courts, and of course we've got these folks on board to get 12 post-tension concrete courts that would last decades. Parties all agreed to look into that possibility. In January of 22, we made a presentation to the City Council, and we received the approval of funding up to $750,000, matching with the school district and the Friends raising between $600,000 and $750,000, depending on what all the amenities and all the other expenses would run. So that happened, and the estimate from Park Commissioner, not Commissioner, I'm sorry, that's decades ago. So Park Director Jean Rathje at the time was about $2.1 million for the 12 courts. Now, Friends Board, in order to sell anything, you have to have renderings, you have to have pictures, you have to have a ballpark figure for what the cost is going to be. We didn't have any of that. We didn't know what we were going to sell or how we were going to sell it or what it even looked like. So that has been a major delay in getting this, even presenting anything to corporate donors and to have a grant application. No grant committee is going to approve something if they don't know what it looks like or where it's going to be. So that has been a major hurdle. So February of 22 is the kind of sticking point. We have been waiting for fundraising to really be effective and get a solid position of where it's going to be, how much it's going to cost, and a bona fide bid from a contractor to the city. And grants will not be accepted without specific details mentioned above. I'll have Blair answer a little bit about that regarding fundraising and grants, which is a key component of this. And then September of 22, we couldn't, from February to September, we didn't have any bona fide bids. We had no idea what it was going to cost. And so the bid process began in September of 22. In that time, we were told to wait for the parks plan to be completed in order to solidify the location. Tennis committee was told by Phil Rath to expect bids by November of 22. Well, we actually got the bids about January of 23, the third week of January of 23. And one bid came back, which was approximately $1.1 million over the initial budget that Mr. Rathje kindly provided us. I think COVID had a lot to do with that, but since that time, we've got much higher costs that we have to account for. Then City Council rejected the bid from the contractor. March of 22, we have been awaiting additional bids, and we're told by Jean and Phil that this may not be an ideal time to request bids, as most of all contractors are very busy pursuing and completion of current projects. Now, I was on vacay last week, and I did not know this, that the first week of July, we had another bid that came in, and it was not accepted. Thank you, Phil, for providing that. Anyway, the cost, one of the major problems with Sycamore Park is that there's going to be a lot, hundreds of tons of dirt to be brought in to provide some adequate drainage for that area. Plus, you're going to destroy 20 to 40 trees that are 35 to 40 feet high. I don't like cutting down a single tree. That's one of the problems with the existing location, a couple of them anyway. I'd like Blair to talk a little bit about grants in this process, if you would. Blair?
So really, I just want to stress, so I know this may seem like a very aggressive timeline. When it comes to grant funding, we have a lot already put together in terms of sort of the history, how we got to this point. And I think we are still very well aligned to hit our goal. I do appreciate the way Mike reiterated a lot of the fundraising that we would be doing would be for some of that ancillary things like concessions and that kind of thing. I would love, I personally love the location of this. I remember the pit back in my time at the high school. I would love to give that a whole new look, a whole new name. I think maybe we could look at making that a naming option. I think, I don't know, maybe the Richard Johnson parking lot has a great ring. I think we could make that its own naming opportunity. But I still think, even with this aggressive timeline, I think with the school system stepping up into this role, it gives us an opportunity to, we still have some corporate funders that I think would still be interested in this project that we've had some initial conversations with. I think we'll still hit our deadlines. And with the school system on board like this, it gives us an opportunity to do multi-year pledges as well, which I think will be pivotal in making this project complete. So I just want to reiterate that I do think we can still make this project happen within this aggressive timeline.
Thank you, Blair. I'd also like to have Mark come in and just talk about participation of the schools in tennis and what the potential of having brand new courts in our town is. Go ahead, Mark.
Good evening. I would just tell you that if with a 12-court facility, we would have great ability to obviously host meets at our school. We would be able to have tournaments in the summer that we could host. People coming in from all over the state, all over the Midwest. At one time, I know Ottumwa had court sponsors like the Miller High Life down here for a tennis tournament. I used to play in it when I had good knees, and it's very, very possible to do that type of thing again when you've got a first-class facility. So you've got the tournaments. There are adult leagues that we would have at night. There would be lessons that we would be conducting during the day. All of these things would happen with a facility like this. Right now, we're pretty restricted as far as what we're able to offer kids. And the fact that, we are giving lessons over at Bridgeview right now that the courts have holes and waves in them and plants growing out of them. And it's just not conducive to play. So, we would be able to have those things. And that's very exciting. It's very exciting. And as Blair said, we already have some corporate sponsors in mind that we've contacted, once we had some kind of approval that we could go after this. So I'm personally very excited about it and what the future could bring with it. So there you go. Mark?
Well, most of you know that we had single courts that are now converted into pickleball courts, and they're becoming well played. So that loses 2 more courts. So now we're down to 10. But I personally play. In fact, I would be playing right now if I wasn't here, because my group is playing right now. And we play on the one court that's good in Ottumwa. And last week we only had 2 bounces that were bad. Like one went over my head, one rolled to the. So it's not a good thing. But just to reiterate what they've said, we just need to get this done. I was on the deal when we rebuilt the Stags courts years ago, and I said I'd never be on a situation like this again. I was almost to the point again where I'm done with this. It's tough dealing with government entities. It's just one of those things, So, but I appreciate your time and your consideration. I think that it would improve that neighborhood tremendously, because there's a lot of people who will not go to Center Avenue, because it's just not that right of town. We can change that part of town. I mean, there's people live there who fix their homes down there that look nice. I mean, it create many more great things out of that community that we can be proud of at Ottumwa. Thank you.
As you can tell by the enthusiasm of the people that just spoke, we're pumped for this to get done. If I have a rendering that Landon put together to share with another corporate entity, I could sell this deal, but we don't have the numbers yet, but we will get those very soon. So We appreciate, the commitment of the city in this project and the school district certainly, and we would encourage you to continue to support this project. Thank you very much.
I know you've been listening for a while, so we'll just open it up for any questions the council may have.
I guess, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's one thing that maybe just wasn't mentioned as part of this. So with the project the city was initially looking at was for the post-tension concrete courts. Big part of that was the reduced maintenance over the life of that court. But that also leads to the higher upfront cost of that. And so I think that's one of the reasons the bids came back high. I'm assuming that this project is going to be a little less than that, using post-tension, or what was the thought with that? Because you
Sure.
mentioned maintenance costs as part of
Yeah.
your process.
We kind of feel twofold, I think, Phil. Is like, one is that we're totally committed to the maintenance on a yearly basis, and that's what's critical with tennis courts, is that you're really committed to that maintenance on a regular basis. And then what Phil's talking about is the three different types that I'm aware of concrete. Tennis courts is you have your post-tension, pre-tension, and then just concrete courts. They're great. All three of them are great courts. It's just like Phil mentioned, is the longevity. Post-tension is going to last longer potentially than pre-tension or just regular cement. But it all depends on how well you take care of it, because everyone will tell you cement will crack at some point. It's going to happen at some point. It's just a matter of when. And so we would probably be pragmatic in this project a little bit, where we'd probably bid it out in a way where we'd get bids on all those different levels to see where they come in at. Because one of the things, the last thing we'd want to have happen here is that we couldn't move forward with the project. So we want to give ourselves some options. I think, and I hope the council has seen that whatever this district does, they do it first class and do it well. And we're committed to doing that here too. So other questions?
I guess one of the questions that I'd have, if this is going to be available to the public, how would the school district handle having the restrooms and the concession stand open evenings, weekends, holidays, that kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah, kind of, we, as what was mentioned before, we put in new playgrounds, new mini pitches, but certainly for our students, for sure, but for our community as well. And we see this as just an extension of that. We want this to be a community use. The way we would set it up is we would have it lit up at night. It would stay open maybe till 10 or 11 for anybody to use. And then we would probably lock it up for security reasons and so forth. We'd have it well lit up so people felt comfortable coming to that area. The parking lot would also be well lit as well. As far as using, the bathrooms would be open similar at timeline all day, and we may close those at 10. I'm not sure, probably. And then as needed, probably for concessions. When organizations needed concessions, we would give them access if there was an organization that wanted to use that. So I don't know if that answered all your
Yeah, the
questions.
only reason I bring it up, and I'm not trying to
Yeah.
be negative, but the city had some really nice public restrooms
Yeah.
behind River Hills at one time when I worked at River Hills, and they just absolutely got trashed out.
Right.
They got set on fire. Homeless people tried to live in them. And when you offer nice public restrooms and a concession stand, if it's not locked up and secured
Yeah.
and somebody's monitoring that, it'll all get trashed out over time.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'd hate to see that happen to your project, because I think it's a wonderful project.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we kind of deal with that as a school district as well, because we have some outdoor facilities. So we're very cognizant of what you have to do to ensure that they don't get trashed. So.
Council have any questions, comments?
I do. So first off, I thank you for coming tonight. I think
Yeah.
that the renderings that you've provided us are great. I also like the idea of that neighborhood revitalization. I think that's a great spot too. I do just have a couple
Sure.
questions I want to follow up on, and a couple of these may be for Phil or Zach or Jean too. But so first off, piggybacking on what the mayor said. So if like scheduling and then like people out, like if they want to bring an outside tournament in, will you develop a plan for that? So it's easy for will they call the school, in the summer, school's closed? So have you thought that far ahead yet?
Yeah, actually, we have. One thing that the district's very adept at is scheduling. And the reason we have so many facilities that our community uses now, like gyms, all sorts of facilities, that we have a system in place, and we probably use the same system here where you would just contact an individual. Right now, it's in our athletic department at the high school. You just contact that individual and you say when you need it and so forth, and then it gets reserved for you. And then the other things that you might need with that as well, like if you need concessions and so forth. Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
Mike's just going to mention too, this also has the ability to be public facing. So this calendar we could put out to the public. They could see what courts were available, who has times reserved, and then know and can adjust accordingly.
So then that would also be able to during the school day, because I know the playgrounds, obviously, and the mini pitches, that you couldn't use that during the day, but this would have the ability for, I think someone mentioned lessons. And so people could do lessons during the week, during the day too, potentially.
Yeah, I think we may have to block sometimes during the day for usage, but we would be committed to keeping it as available as much as possible for, Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. I guess this question may be again for Phil, Park, or Jean. How, by moving this to these courts to this location, which again, I love this location, does that affect our park plan?
I guess I could say a few things on that. I think that it creates a decision that has to be made about the park plan as far as whether we still want to provide public courts and park settings somewhere in Greater Ottumwa Park, and just make that a priority in a different phase. I think that decision has to be made. And then also how we want to program that space in City Hall Park moving forward, if we don't, is an additional question.
Yeah, and I know that just speaking recently with plans with the indoor sports complex, there were maybe some overlapping concerns with spacing for where the courts were looking at compared to where the facility was looking at, and then the potential for any expansion of that indoor sports facility should it need arise that wouldn't allow for that. So having courts in an area like this and being able to move those resources opens up some opportunities with that. I think if we're looking at, the city's looking at contributing to this project, knowing that the project as we had originally bid that for the type of construction we had, not having funds available from the school district, putting it into this instead. And I'm not sure what the Parks Committee, Friends of the Parks Committee would be going forward. That puts that project out a good decade or more. So I think, that gives us an opportunity to reevaluate a piece of that park plan. There's looking at the potential of moving the skate park. Does that become a viable location for it if we're looking at that space? So there's some different opportunities that we have should the council want to commit those funds in this area, which all the things that were mentioned I think are valid and good, and still maintains that relationship, that partnership going forward. One small piece, should the council decide that this is something that you want to do, we had bonded for those funds. It's more of a procedural thing that we would have to do. My understanding is we would have to hold a public hearing and reclassify that bond. I think we had it as essential corporate purpose previously, and that 750, and we'd have to reclassify that to general corporate purpose because it's not in a park. If we do this, we can do this, but it would just be one extra step. And if that's something you want to do, maybe suggest an action be to hold a public hearing at the August 1st meeting, and move forward in that way. So you wouldn't have to vote specifically on that tonight because you still have to have that public hearing regardless. But that would be kind of showing some support in that direction.
And when you change the type of bonding, doesn't that change the dollar amount too?
Yes. So there's one piece. There was a change in the law recently. I'm assuming that applies to new borrowed money. I want to clarify that. And if that is the case, general corporate purpose, we would not be able to bond more than $700,000 for the project. So if you still wanted to commit $750,000, the city would have to determine where that additional 50,000 was coming from, if we can only go up to the 700,000 under that general corporate purpose.
And then I just have one more statement too. I just want to reiterate the fact that I heard you say that the school is committed to the upkeep of this. I think that was an ongoing concern for us, or I shouldn't speak for the rest of council, but for me with the putting and spending this money toward new tennis courts is the upkeep, because we only have one parks department and a ton of parks. So that is an important piece for me. And I have just one more thing. The trees. So are you looking to plant more trees? Because there's not that many down there, right?
Well, we are looking at planting more trees, but if you look, when you have an opportunity, and I was going to mention, if anybody ever wanted a tour, just feel free to contact me. I'd be glad to take you down there. But there's a part of the enticement of this area is there are a lot of trees on one side around there. It's really a nice kind of feel for tennis courts. But to answer your question fully, we would put in additional trees around the tennis courts. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does council have any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I guess I just have a couple. I think that this is a fantastic idea here. Looking at what the parks plan was and what it could be in the future, making some minor tweaks to that with the removal of this piece from Sycamore Park. I think that we have an excellent park system over in that area, but one of the things that has concerned me over the years has been that it's not really a park that people can have leisurely time in, but it's more of a sports park. And putting this in there, with the addition of the sportsplex, with the possibility at some point in the future of soccer fields, it seems that we're eating away at what the idea of that Greater Ottumwa Park was actually supposed to be. So in my mind, pulling this away from there is actually a good thing. And I do have to agree with Blair. When my memory of this area in high school, I can promise you not a single one of those memories was good. Every one of them involved something that probably I shouldn't have been doing, or blood.
There was a reason they called it the pit.
That's right.
I can second that motion.
But yeah, I think that this is an area of the community that really has been ignored for literally decades. So the idea that we're actually bringing something into that area and creating that community for the high school and wrapping this into the new facility that you have, and then creating that trail system between all of those facilities, I think is a wonderful idea for the community, for the school district. So I think that this is a better placement for it, and I'm excited to see it move forward.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
I got a comment. I like the fact that you're going to, even though it's open to the public, but it's also taking a high school sport more in tune with the high school and Schaefer Stadium and everything else. I agree with the rest of us that it's a better location by looking at that and listen to you guys speak. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Oh, thanks.
I've enjoyed it all. I just was wondering, where would you position the walkway from,
That's a really,
in?
it's a really good question. Is that from these tennis courts, if you go up the street, it's about 0.2 miles to Schaefer, and you could put the walkway potentially in that direction. I think the other option you might have would be on the other side. You could go through on the other side and go up that way as well. So I think you have a couple options for the walkway. And I really think, again, it's maybe for selfish reasons. I think our people would use things more like Schaefer and so forth during the day if they had that walkway. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilman Hall, would you like to say something?
I suppose since I'm the only one that hasn't said anything, I'll just say, I really appreciate the Ottumwa school system stepping up and making our community a better place. And this is just a step forward in the right direction for our community. And I really appreciate you guys bringing this to us and having a plan in place for this. At the rate we're going, we could be, with construction costs, it could be another 10 years before we can get a good bid in. So we really appreciate you guys doing this. And I look forward to supporting this.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
When I finally do retire, I'll work in your concession stand. My knees aren't good enough for tennis anymore.
Mayor, I would actually motion to hold a public hearing at the August 1st meeting.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Oh, the tablets aren't a gift?
Some school child.
Easy
is gonna
come,
need
easy
that.
go.
I know your email. Oh, yeah.
Just to finish, if I could thank, I want to thank Landon and also Dave Harper from the district for helping with the presentation. They did a lot of this presentation. And then also our friends in the parks for joining us today too. And then also to you, Phil and the council for being a great collaborative partner. And we're really excited about this project and we're really excited to do it with you. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Resolution number 108, 2023, approving change order number 2 for the Pawnee Drive reconstruction project. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 108, 2023.
Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Phil?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So when we design streets, we call in design information requests so we know where utilities are at, and then we'll send those plans to the utilities in order for them to review them and tell us where their utilities are at. And that was all followed on this project. And we knew there was 2 gas transmission lines there. And everybody thought they were going to be a lot deeper than they were. We actually went over the top of one of them at Osage. And it was deep at the bottom of the hill. When we got to the south end of the street, the gas line was only 16 inches deep, and it was directly underneath the road. And typically when that happens, we can tell the utility, because they're in our right of way at our convenience, to move. In this case, though, these were transmission lines that were coming from a larger main, and they actually supplied the entire city with gas. And they gave us an easement, and the easement only specified they had to be below plow depth, because the easement was in about 1930s. And so 16 inches, I guess, is below plow depth. And when we found out they had an easement for it, we had 2 options. Either we paid to move the line or we moved the road. And moving the line was a non-starter because it would run the city out of gas. So we had to regather our information and move the road a little bit. We narrowed the road down 2 feet to get it away from the line. This line was also kind of older. It was from the 1950s, and it wasn't really that we were going to interfere with it. They were worried about vibration, perhaps damaging the welds in the line. So that's how this happened. It's not something that typically happens. Typically, the utilities move for us, but this time we had to move for the utilities. So that's the background on why the change order happened on this street. Any questions?
So that change order would amount to approximately 51,000 then?
Yes. And that was partially offset by narrowing the street down. We paid for 2 feet less pavement. I don't have the number in front of me, but I believe over half that number was offset by having a smaller street. They had to restake the line. We had to redesign it. They had to cut some of their dowel baskets, and we had to change the way we treated the subgrade too. They couldn't use vibratory compaction on a large part of the street, so we had to change how we constructed that so they could static roll it. That takes more time and more effort to compact that way.
Does council have any questions for Phil?
I have one. Phil, one of the issues that virtually every single business out in the industrial park has is access, specifically for the long trucks and the trailers. the access out in that entire industrial park is horrible for truck traffic.
Yeah.
How does them narrowing the streets affect that?
It shouldn't. So they were built 31 feet wide, which that's two 15-foot wide lanes. Even a semi truck doesn't need 15-foot wide lanes. Like a typical highway is only 12 feet wide. So there shouldn't be any access issues by narrowing it to 29 feet. They still have two 14-foot lanes they can drive down. And the radiuses on the intersections weren't changed either. So the radiuses are just as wide as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Phil? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Thank you.
Before we go any further with our agenda, I think this would be a good time to deal with those tabled items.
Resolution number 114, 2023, approving the compensation handbook as presented and make it a part of our current employee handbook. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 114, 2023.
Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, Barb?
Thank you. So I know we went over this and spent a lot of time through it last night, but just kind of for the benefit of the public, I'll touch on some of the things on the staff summary. The compensation handbook includes two different policies. One is a compensation philosophy, and then the other one is our administrative guidelines. So the compensation philosophy would identify where we are saying as a city, we are going to put our compensation. It will identify the different sister cities that we have compared ourselves to, and then the administrative guidelines kind of contains everything else. It gives us the salary schedule, the classification structure, the classification framework, and then how as an employee you would move through the different grades or steps or whatever that is. Gives us some guidelines, and it really puts into practice some of the different things that we've talked about for many years, but this gives us some consistency for it. For implementation for this, we will place all positions not under the collective bargaining agreement on the salary schedule, and we would ask that that would be retroactive back to July 1st. When we do have contract negotiations, we will take this information to those negotiation tables and work with the unions to make that effective for them as well. So when we looked at all of this, and as far as budgeting goes, we did put a placeholder in our budget this year before we got the Gallagher study back to be able to identify, to be able to pay for some of these things. And so when we did budget for it, and then we got those numbers back, if we made all of those changes immediately as of July 1st, that would put us well over what we had even budgeted for those changes. So we did have to be creative, and we took some of the information that Gallagher had provided to us that this may have to be done over multiple years. And we do have a handful of employees that these changes would be done. We would make everybody whole within 2 years. And so when we looked at it initially, we looked at anyone that would be making $10,000 more than what their current salary is. If we could phase that in, still didn't provide us enough. So then we went back and we looked at if it was $5,000 more than what their current salary is, being able to phase that in within 2 years. That got us to where we needed to be. So what we are proposing is that if the salary change would be $5,000 or less, we will make that entire change effective as of July 1st. If it's $5,000 or more, we would make a change, and it would take 2 years. Whatever that difference is, we would take 25% of that and make that effective July 1, the other 25% of that effective January 1, and then we will budget and work through the other 50% for next year for FY25 with the intent of being whole for all employees by the end of FY25. When we look at budgets, again, just giving some numbers, we have the information that we budgeted for with the pay, all of our taxes, our insurance, everything like that. Putting all of these changes in, it does put us over our general fund by about $39,000. Total, when we look at all of our funds, it puts us over about $22,000. A couple of things to keep in mind when we did budget. We budgeted for what everybody's salary would be as of June 30th of 2024. So if someone maybe would go up on July 1st based on that 25% increase and then the increase in January, but then they get a step increase come June 1st, whatever that salary is June 1st, we have budgeted for the entire year, even though they don't actually get that the entire year. So again, not that we're padding numbers, that's not the intent, but it is to give us a cushion for whatever that comes up. So again, whatever these salaries are that we're budgeted for and that $39,000 that we would be over in the general fund, we have that cushion built into all of those salaries that are there.
And you did that for authorized FTEs that are currently vacant as well, correct?
Correct. So we do have, we have added different positions this year. There were a couple. We added the HR generalist. We have budgeted for the IT technician, a public information officer. There's some positions that we've budgeted for. That dollar amount was fully budgeted into these numbers. And we do have a handful of positions right now that are not filled. We are working to fill those. We are not stopping or trying to not fill those to pay for these positions. But it's just by the means of things right now, those just are not filled.
Does council have any questions for Barb?
Not necessarily questions, just comments. So some of this is going to be repetition from what we talked about last night. I'm in favor of moving forward with this. However, to reiterate what I said last night, there are several components of this compensation study that link back to policies that don't exist in the city. I think it needs to be a priority that if we're going to implement something, that everything that's a piece of that exists. Example, employee evaluations. I know you said you're working on that, but this comp plan is specifically pointing to something that doesn't exist yet. So then with the merit-based system, you're pointing to a merit-based system that doesn't exist in the city. So that's something else that we need to address. And another item that we need to address is the job descriptions. Again, I know that as part of this compensation study, you're talking about the job descriptions, but I'm still curious whether some of the employees within the city are truly operating under the job descriptions that they signed off on. And that could present itself an issue down the road also. And if we're going to look at a merit-based system, if we're going to look at evaluations, we need to make sure that we have the proper job descriptions in place. And I guess that my final comment on this, really, because I've heard a little bit of rumblings about this, and as a reminder, this compensation study was not undertaken as a measure of equitability towards each of the individual employees of the city. This was to make the pay equitable to the job that they were doing, not to their fellow employees. I think that that's something that somehow has gotten lost in translation. If we were talking about what was equitable to the other employees, we might be talking about a union type situation, which we're not in this particular case. So just a reminder to everybody that these jobs were more put in line with the jobs that they were performing, not their fellow coworkers. And that's really all I have to say.
One thing, and just to add, just so that way everybody is aware, Gallagher is working on the job descriptions now. And that is something, actually, I think it's this week or next week, beginning of next week, I think. We have another conference call with them to review the first 10. And that's what they're doing, is they're working on a couple of them at a time. They want to make sure that they get it correct. We will review that. I'll provide any feedback to them as to, yes, we like this, or no, we don't like that. And the job descriptions are based on the PDQs that everybody filled out. And then once they get the approval that, yes, that's the direction we're going to go, they will complete all the rest of the job descriptions, and we will have those. And that's part of this process with Gallagher, is for them to complete those job descriptions. And that way we've got some consistency too within language, and because we've seen that as an issue.
That was going to be my follow-up question to Councilman Rowe. Has Gallagher given you any kind of even generalized time frame because they know how many PDQs they reviewed, do they have any general idea when all of those new job descriptions will be done?
No, because unfortunately they lost another person on our project, Maria, that was actually here with us. We were told that she is actually now going to be gone from Gallagher as well. So she was the one who was doing a lot of that. There was another lady that I had met with, I think it was Friday we met, Thursday or Friday. And she is actually taking over for Maria. She's been working with her for the last 2 weeks. And so she is going to be the one to present those to us so we can take a look at it. Once they get the first couple of ones done, it should be fairly easy for them to get those worked through.
So you're not anticipating it'll take like a whole nother year to get all the job
gosh,
descriptions
no.
done?
My thought would be, based on the conversation with the project manager, it'd be maybe another month.
I got a question for you, Barb. We talked a little bit earlier before the thing. Could you just let the public know that what the study came up with, that don't mean that there may be somebody that's doing 2 more jobs that you're not aware of, that the study did not show and it's not in their job description. This is not set in concrete. If someone can come up to there, that you're open to talk with them and discuss that. If you can just share that so the public
Yeah.
knows, I'd appreciate it.
So one of the things in the compensation handbook is we do now have a structured process for reclassification. So if there is an employee or if there is a manager or somebody that feels that maybe their grade assignment or where they're at in the framework isn't right, or if they take on additional duties or different things like that, there is now a process for us to go through and reclassify that. And then we also have it set in there too, that if there is someone who is doing interim duties, and there's some guidelines for that, but if they are doing things that are above and beyond what their job description states, we can absolutely take a look at that and look at whether it's interim pay or a reclassification. This is not set in stone. I mean, I know since I've been here, I think we've passed the personnel policies 13 times in 2 years that I've been here. So I look at this as kind of that same way, that it is always a moving target. And as we have things that come up, as things happen in our society or with our jobs or whatever that is, this is going to be something that's going to change, and it may change often. And we have to be able to be nimble for that.
But at least you have a comprehensive framework now to be able to make those changes if necessary.
Absolutely.
To me, that's the big important piece to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone else have questions, comments for Barb?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. So you did discuss that we're about 33,000 over the general fund again. So Mike, and I think you kind of explained how the city plans to maintain or deal with that situation. I'd like you to just state that one more time. And then my next question is about how are we going to be able to maintain this?
So right now I've got it at about 39,000 is what we're over in the general fund. And again, the big thing with that is when we budgeted for all of our salaries, we budget it for what happens at the very end of the year. So I do know, I know that there's a number of people in the room right now tonight that many of their step increases may not happen until April or May or March or June. And so while we have budgeted, maybe it's 120,000 is what they'll be at the end of June, they may right now in July may be at 100,000. So there is some difference that's there, and that little bit of cushion. That was what does not give me too great a pause on that 39,000. And, we filled our HR generalist, and I know it's not much, but it is 2 weeks later than what we had originally budgeted for. Our IT technician, we have not filled that position yet. We're working through the job description now. The public information officer has to go to civil service. And so that will go to civil service tomorrow. We will post that for at least 3 weeks and then work through the testing and the interviewing and then getting that person on board. So again, we've got some open positions, and it's not that we are sacrificing any of those open positions, but there is a little bit of savings right there that we're not spending currently for that. So, and then as far as sustainability, I'd kind of turn that over to Phil and Wasim. It'll be something that, we'll budget for, but they could add more information to that.
Yeah, this year was a down year a little bit in the revenue. Our assessed valuation went down. I had mentioned during the budget process, anticipating some bounce back on that. We will have a little bit of a hiccup that we'll work through with the passage of House File 718 and how that affects us. At the conference last week, Ted Nelson was there from the state and he was talking about some of that, the impacts that may have on communities and how much we can grow and how that all affects us. So as we go into the budget process, we'll definitely look at that. But it is something that I'm confident we'll be able to maneuver through. And the biggest part will be having some of that bounce back. So we put more onto that TIF certification this year, which was playing catch up on that, but that also impacted our general fund revenue as a result of that. We should see that assessed valuation come back on and be a positive for the city moving forward. If you remember that cost several $100,000 right there from having that move.
And then I guess my final point will be to that of what Councilperson Rowe said regarding the policies that are in the compensation handbook that aren't yet created. And I would really like to see that be a priority. The last time, or when we came together to approve this, the compensation study in general, that was a discussion. And I think Councilperson Rowe has identified that multiple times throughout my tenure here, which hasn't been very long. So to have something mentioned multiple times shows the necessity of it. And again, I think yesterday when Councilperson Rowe discussed it, he had said it has been in discussion for years. Again, no fault to you two, because it was even prior to the two of you. So I do think that those two things, or those policies, need to be a priority. And I would like to see those come to us in a relatively quick manner. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess real quick, fully agree with that. Obviously, one of the big focuses in HR with the one-person team has been hiring and trying to fill vacancies that exist across the city. And so that, for better or worse, has had to take a priority and just to keep things moving forward. But definitely now with having an HR generalist, having some assistants, we talked about it was part of the goal setting last year for me and the HR policies, and policies have been under review. I think you've seen a number of changes coming through. This compensation plan was obviously one of those. We have had conversations about that and what that would look like with the review process. And it's, I'd say a little fuller as to what we're looking at, and that ties into succession planning and everything else. So definitely those are things that are in the works, and with some extra support, will be moved up on the.
Yeah. And I think that's why I'm coming with more of an urgency now, because there is that support that will be coming. I know that she's still in her current position and will be transitioning. So I think now is the right time to really start pushing that is getting done, especially if we're going to approve a handbook that has a policy. You can't, it's hard to approve a policy that's not there. Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments from council for Barb?
Yeah, I got some things. First off, I would say thank you, Barb, for working with the team at Gallagher to get this all ready to go and presented to us. I know we've all been chomping at the bit to have this presented to us. I do have a question. In the salary structure, step 1 to step 2 to step 3, what is the percentage of between those? Do you know the percentage exactly?
I do not. It is a specific dollar amount, though. It starts off with grade 1. The difference between salary or step 1 and step 2, it will vary either between $832 or $816, and it's across the entire grade, and it just goes up from there. I do not have what that specific percentage is.
So we didn't set that on a percentage. We just set it as a dollar amount.
So the way that Gallagher set that was that they set the entire range at a 30%. So from step 1 to step 13, it's a 30% range. And then the intent was to make sure that all of the steps were equal throughout that entire range.
Okay, I understand that now. Okay, so in the handbook on page 10, under discretionary, it says all discretionary increases and incentives of more than 5% must be approved in writing by Human Resources Director and City Administrator. As we've all been kindly pointed out that our job is fiduciary, where does the council fit into anything above, 1 or 2 steps? How does that get resolved? Can an employee go up 2 steps in 1 year, or are they only allowed 1 step a year?
So that's 2 questions. The first question, as far as the council involvement, part of our hiring policy was that those final decisions went up to Phil and went to the city administrator. That's absolutely something that we could look at to change if council so wished. And we could even change it within here as well. There is a chance that somebody could go up that many steps in a year. And just for an example, if somebody celebrated an anniversary and then say they did get a certification that was of benefit to the city of a regular use, everything would need to be documented. And that's the big thing with this. One of the things that came out of one of our meetings with regarding a certification is identifying like a form that HR and the city administrator would sign off on, the employee would sign off on it, stating that I understand I obtained the certification and therefore I increased X amount of steps. If I let that certification lapse, I will be, reduce that many steps. So again, we've got documentation for everything that we do.
If I could interject one thing here really quick, specific to your question, I think that it would be important for the city council to remember moving forward that our role is not administrative in nature. So specific to that fiduciary component, we would be voting up or down budgetary adjustments, not individual step increases for employees, because that is administrative in function.
Thank you, Mark. So the only other thing I had was at the bottom of it, the clerk position. You have lifeguard position listed in there.
Mm-hmm.
Is the lifeguard not a seasonal job?
It is a seasonal position.
Okay. So there might be some contradictory there then, because lifeguard is a grade 1. A grade 1 is $33.92.80 a year. You've got lifeguard listed or seasonal listed at starting $14 an hour. If you do step 1, grade 1, that's $15.91 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a $1.91 difference there.
So we can change it however you'd like. This one at the end, at the bottom of page 19, that is for our seasonal contracted employees. Some of them are seasonal, some of them are not.
Okay.
Some of our contracted employees are all year long. And then we do have, say like in our parks department and then streets and sewers, we have seasonal contracted employees. And then we also have just regular contracted employees that work for us all year long.
Okay.
So we can change those
Well,
would be
I
a
just want to make sure that I'm
council
understanding
decision.
it correctly. Is year 1 $14 an hour under seasonal/contracted? Do the lifeguards fall under that, or are we going to start them at step 1?
So right now, they start under that seasonal contracted. According to this schedule, they would actually be on grade 1.
Okay, so it is kind of contradictory does it contradict itself?
No, because not according to my definition of it and not what we've worked with Gallagher, but that could be changed. So because again, the seasonal contract at the bottom at 19, that is like our contracted employees, or we also have just for the summer, and it is just like our seasonal code enforcement.
Okay.
That's what that is for. And then, but lifeguards, we do have some lifeguards that are all year long.
Okay.
But the lifeguards are hired and on staff. They're not contracted through Supreme
Correct.
Staffing.
Okay.
Correct.
So
Okay.
that's why they're on the schedule.
Yes, thank you, Phil. That might have been explained it better.
I
Sorry.
get where we're at now. I get where we're at. I just want, for my brain, I want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's contradictory, and we are hiring them at the rate that is showing publicly.
Right.
So, all right, that's all I asked and needed. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments for Barb from council? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Hull,
Yes.
Councilmember Pope,
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway? Sorry, went out of order. Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. Resolution number 115, 2023, approving updates to personnel policy. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 115, 2023.
Do we have a motion to approve that recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Barb.
All right, so on this one, it's generally two changes that are in the personnel handbook. Article 10, under benefits, there's a lot that's there: holidays, vacation, sick, and incentive. Essentially, that pertains to our employees that are working 2184 hours that are not covered under the collective bargaining agreement, which is our sergeants at the police department. When they went to 12-hour days, it was not, their accruals were not adjusted based on those 12-hour days. And so while they were working 2184, they were essentially accruing their vacation, their incentive, and things like that at an 8-hour day instead of the 12-hour day. So that was one of the things that came to light in our last contract. And so we would like to put that into our personnel policy so that way they are earning their accruals at the rate that they are working. And then the last thing in there is the longevity. We would add wording in the personnel policy that longevity is now included in the compensation handbook for employees not covered under a collective bargaining agreement.
And most of these current changes were predicated on the sergeants because of their different hours that they work, correct?
Correct. And we've got that, I believe, in most of them. Most of those places is that sergeants would receive 132 hours of holiday pay due to working 2184 hours per year.
Are there any other questions or comments for Barb? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. The next item on the agenda is where I usually ask if anyone in the audience would like to speak on any items that are not on our agenda tonight. If not, we'll go ahead and move to mayor, city council reports or communications. I don't have anything specific that I need to communicate today, but I'll ask council if they have any comments or communications that they'd like to make to the public.
I do. I just want to make everyone aware, the Rob Sand, the auditor of the state, will be having a town hall on Tuesday, July 25th at Jimmy Jones Shelter from 11:30 to 12:30.
Anyone else? Okay. At this time, we are going to go ahead and recess, and the council is going to reconvene in room 108 for a closed session to discuss a personnel matter. And once we're complete with that, we will go ahead and adjourn our council meeting from room 108. So thank you, everybody, for coming this evening, and safe travels home.